Grace, mercy, and peace to you from God our Father and from Jesus Christ our Lord. This is the day the Lord has made it. We are glad and we are rejoicing in it. It's a good day to be alive. It is a good day to be in Formation Saturday with each and every one of you. You know, Formation Saturday is a space where leaders gather to learn and to grow through candid conversations around faith and ministry and spiritual development, typically inviting friends and other theological thinkers to engage in conversation. And today is absolutely no different. We've been journeying through the Ten Commandments, and this week we're shifting our focus. Last month we did the first four commandments, the commandments that focuses on loving God. This month we're focusing on loving our neighbor. Last month we used a liberation theologist, and this month we will engage womanist theology. And womanist theology simply explores how Black women have embodied love for neighbor despite historical and ongoing challenges. And so we're going to delve into how this womanist ethic and womanist practices illuminates commandments 5 through 10. They don't just show us what to avoid, they show us what to embrace and how to move forward in our life journey. So today I am absolutely honored. I'm excited because I have a longtime friend. I consider her a sister joining us today. Her name is Lesley Gooden. Lesley is a doctoral student in educational leadership at Memphis Theological Seminary, and she's the ingenious force behind Black Girl Theology. And Black Girl Theology is a social media platform publishing books, hosting spiritual formation groups specifically for Black women. Now, a lot of you don't know this, but Lesley is one of the behind the scenes forces in my personal life. She's what I call a peer review partner. And now, nearly 20 years, she has read sermons and read pastoral documents up to and including the shaping and the writing out of our church's constitution, and given insight and practical wisdom and theology and all of that for, oh Lord, right at 20 years. And so this is my first time being able to welcome her to our space. And so I am absolutely excited to welcome woman. She calls herself the womanist mystic now. My friend and sister, Lesley Gooden. How are you, Lesley?
I am doing well and shocked. It just hit me. It has literally been about 20 years. We old, man.
I don't know about that last statement. Statement. But
You're older than me. You're older than me. I will always remind you of that. God bless you.
But we have been back and forth in theology conversations,
Absolutely.
Ministry conversations for right at 20 years. Now,
yes.
we have not talked, so let me congratulate you on pledging Delta, girl.
I didn't pledge Delta.
You didn't pledge?
No.
What you mean you didn't pledge?
You done found you a new person? Y'all, the church is in mourning.
The church is in mourning. My research told me that somebody was a Delta.
Ooh, child. You got the wrong Lesley.
The wrong Lesley? Lord.
You know 50 million people, Reverend.
I thought that was you.
Listen, I got a twin.
I got
a twin after Delta.
You gotta have a twin.
Not Lord, y'all. He done pulled out the phone. He got to go find it now.
Yeah. You know what? It was the
Now my best friend
friend.
pledged Delta.
It was the friend.
Okay, yeah, my best friend pledged.
It was the friend. Because I was finna fuss. That's why I was asking. Because I was finna fuss on air in front of the whole world and be like, how you gonna pledge a Greek sorority and not invite me? It was finna be issues, complications, and furniture moving.
Of course not. Of course not. And then you should know better. You know that wasn't even what was on my radar. So you should know that.
That's why I was asking. Because I was going to be upset that I didn't get
Like, when you changed your mind and didn't tell me. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the exact point of the question. Raising this question and dealing with it in the way that we just did is to show you our relationship. This is every single conversation.
Absolutely.
So you'll enjoy it. Now I have to give a disclaimer, and this is this is the theologian side, so that we can jump into all that we're going to jump into today. Now, theology is not a monolith. Theology, we don't come at theology with one frame of view. That's why last month we had Tyree Anderson on. Tyree is steeped in liberation theology. Out of that whole Virginia Union, Sam DeWitt Proctor School of thought. And so he had his work in liberation and historical liberation. So we did that. Now we have you, Lesley, who's studying womanist theology. I personally did my work in systematic theology. All of my work, I did all my doctoral work in systematic theology. And what's remarkable is that Tyree and I, speaking of Greeks, we're frat. He's a Sigma as well, and we maintain a relationship even though our school of thoughts differ. And my relationship with you, we got 20 years in the game. And listen, some of our biggest arguments is when it comes down to theology.
Absolutely.
And I bring that up to say that even when we don't necessarily come to agreement, it is important for us to hear each other and to consider because you never grow until you're stretched.
Absolutely.
And so I kind of want to start with that. How has the different theological streams informed your work, and how does liberation and womanist and all of the different streams fit into your approach to theological work and ministry work?
Oh, okay. That is a great question. And so what's really interesting, I'll tell you guys this quick story before I answer it, because this actually has to do with the answer to that question. When I was beginning my doctoral work, I was very much on the fence about where I kind of wanted to land, what I wanted to be my area of expertise. And actually my conversation with, I call him Maurice, that's y'all's pastor, with Pastor, was
I'll
the
be Maurice
one
today.
was one around having these conversations about what Black women were doing in the church, what Black women were becoming in the church, and our experience of Black women. And he actually partially inspired my dissertation. So I do owe you that credit. I'll give it to you publicly today. You got about 3 more times, and then that disappears from the story.
Okay.
However,
this is recorded, so I'll be able to play it on a loop.
You can play it on the low. There you go. And it was this conversation around the reclamation and recognition of Black women, kind of regaining our spiritual autonomy and kind of regaining those definitions. And one of the ways that I determined to kind of dive into that was by diving into African traditional religions, or ATRs. And over time, it was so interesting to me to see how much we had that was alike versus how much was different. And it was so wonderful just to kind of make that connection. So over time, having a friend like Maurice, who's very heavy in systematic theology, and like he said, for years, I have been a ghost reviewer for him, reviewing different viewpoints. So kind of having that information in my back pocket and being able to have those conversations. And even with Dr. Anderson, locally, we're kind of in semi-circles. We kind of have some of the same friends. And for those of you who aren't familiar with womanist theology was really the answer to Black liberation theology, because ultimately we felt that this statement was being made that said, hey, we're all about liberating these people. We're all about doing this. But we're like, hey, y'all left us out. Y'all doing all this work, but not talking about the Black woman who's on literally the forefront in so much of the movement. So womanist theology was an answer to that. So overall, of course, I have to first be shaped by this idea of liberation. I have to come to the table and say, no, ultimately my goal is for all of our people to be free. That's the goal of womanist theology, where we say, no, not only do we want Black people free, we want Black people, including Black women, and the other to be free. In addition to, we want to be able to have a very holistic form of theology, or as I like to call it, God talk. We talk about theology just being the way we talk about God. So it's really being able to have these holistic conversations and see God from these different viewpoints, and realizing that that takes nothing away from my faith journey, to see that somebody has something slightly different or somebody believes slightly different. So really is this idea of being able to talk about God in these really holistic ways.
Yeah, I appreciate that framing that you just offered there, because when we look at Marvin McMichael's "Let the Oppressed Go Free," where he walks through the historical development all the way from liberation in South Africa to to James Cone and Black liberation theology, and then on through the other, then the feminists, and then from feminists to womanists. As he's walking us through that, he's helping us to see that everybody comes to the table with a different pair of glasses,
Right.
and so we have to be open to hearing what you see through your glasses, and wrestling with that,
Yes.
continuing with that,
Yes.
Yeah, and so I want us to use that lens, the womanist theologian's lens, to consider this second half of the Ten Commandments. I want to start with we're going to start with commandment number 5, which is honor mom and dad. And because I try to read broadly, one of the courses, I especially now that I'm teaching at East Texas, it requires me to read rather broadly. One of the courses I recently taught was Engaging Theology, and the entire course was reading from womanist theology and feminist and systematic and pastoral and synoptic and practical, all of the different houses.
Right.
And one of the things that I came away from that with was this term called other mothering, when I was reading about womanist theology. And I'm interested in the interconnectedness of honor your mother and father with the idea of other mothering. And how does that help us understand this idea of honor? How does it help us expand the conversation beyond just those who are biologically ours? And how does that work between the generations?
Absolutely. I think that that's a very great way to look at it, honestly, because when we come to the table with the Ten Commandments, people tend to take it so literally, take it just for what it says, honor thy father and mother, but they don't take into account that we have varying relationships, that we don't just function on this nuclear family idea, which is so interesting because neither did the Jewish society. They were often multi-generational in a home. So such a statement to just say honor thy father and mother, it seems so vague. But the idea of other mothering, let's deal with that term first. It's a term that originates from African and African American culture, where basically these were the women who would share the responsibility for mothering the children. So for us today, that looks like you have godmom, you have auntie, you have grandmama, you got sisters, whoever the case may be. And this was rooted for us here on these shores after the transatlantic slave trade. Well, let's deal with Africa first. In Africa, it was the fact that these were mostly matriarchal societies. So a lot of the leadership lay with the mother. Often the men were off at war, off hunting, off doing whatever the things were. So you had the mothers who would run the community, and you had the older women who would be the source of wisdom. Even though they weren't specifically Christian, they had very much a Titus 2 model in that the older women taught the younger women how to be married, how to care for the house, how to care for the husband, those types of things. And those relationships would be very much mother-daughter type relationships. So you had those other mothers, those women who might step in because the mother was not available, or you had a grandmother or an aunt who would be that example. So once we come across the transatlantic slave trade, the other mother appears slightly different. If you think about it, there was pretty much the mandate that we did not keep our families together. Our children were taken from us and sold off from the breast often. So the other mother would be that person who would kind of adopt that child, who would take responsibility for that child and begin to raise that child. Sometimes they may have been auntie, they would call them auntie or cousin or even sister, whatever the case may have been. But it was this idea that it was necessary for communal survival once we came across the transatlantic slave trade. And then nowadays we experience that in the church mothers who take responsibility for everybody. They take responsibility for the pastor. They're going to tell pastor what they like and what they don't like, and pastor better listen. Because what I tell people is you can oppose a lot of things in church, but who you better not come up against is them church mothers. I don't care what mothers say, you may not like it, but you better honor it. Likewise, we had the older women who didn't necessarily have jobs, but they could tell you what everybody's child was doing. They were going to check everybody's child. They saw a child in the street, Miss, hey, come here. Who your people is? Your mama got a call for you got home, and you better pray to God and have a relationship with whoever and get your mind right, because it was coming for you. But again, it just goes to speak to this idea that relationships are not one dimensional, and that it really takes a village. Like, this is where we see this whole idea of it takes a village to raise a child. So when we talk about other mothering, it's those women who stepped up. You know, you have the community moms, the community aunties. Like, everybody calls my mama. She's the community mama. Because she's gonna raise everybody, even without trying. She's going to mother you because that's just who she is. So that's where we get this concept of other mothering. And when we apply that commandment to it, it's like, hey, no, we don't just honor those that share our blood. We honor those who have charge over us. We honor those mother figures, those father figures, because they have a spiritual responsibility for us. Because often we also see that the other mother is typically a very spiritual person who is engaging in some form of spiritual training as well.
I want to dig into this a little further, because what you're presenting is a communal investment in another generation, in the next generation.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say it's the next question, the second piece of this question about intergenerational networks. We've kind of lost that.
Yeah.
We kind of lost that. Don't say nothing to my child. You can't. No.
Mm-hmm.
Where do we begin in recreating a atmosphere with other mothering? I'm a creator term. I'm not sure if it's real or no. And other fathering is okay. Where do we? How do we think through that? How do we make that? How do we make that the norm of our community again? Because at this point now, you say something to somebody's child, it's
a whole problem.
You going to jail or hell. It's one of the, and there's no longer the village. Is individual silos more than a full village. So from this lens, where does the corrective begin? That's the question.
Absolutely. So I think that a lot of the hope for Black people lies in the Black church. I tell people I am an apologist for the Black church. Yes, she has her issues. Yes, she has her difficulties. Yes, she has her challenges. But for us, she's the answer. Even when we go back to West African religion and we go back to West African societies, one thing that we notice is that there is this idea of community. Um, One thing that we see in these societies is there's this idea of personhood. We have the not yet born, which is, children who are not yet here. We have the living, we have the living dead, and then we have those who are in the ancestral plane. And all of these roles were based off of the role that you served in the community. You did not achieve personhood or status until you were a benefit to your community or you were determined to be a detriment, which is where we have the living dead. However, I think for us, if we adopt some of those same frameworks, these ideas of living well, the goal of every person is to live well so that the next generation, the not yet born, is blessed by what we have done and that we are able to be praised as a good ancestor or venerated as a good ancestor, one that brought wisdom and one that brought knowledge. I think that the beginning of that is in the Black church. Again, growing up, and I'm sure you can agree with, I know you can attest to this, Maurice, that growing up in the Black church, that is where we got our training.
Mm-hmm.
That is where we were taught to be a friend. That is where we were taught to speak. That is where we were taught to serve. I can remember I was very much a pew baby. I was the one that was sitting on the front row or under the pew playing with some, doing something I shouldn't have been doing, but I was there. So I think for us, if we are going to recreate these networks, I believe that it begins in the Black church. If we can adopt that sense of community in the church once again, because we have become so much with these express services. Church has to be 90 minutes in and out versus when I was growing up, church was an all-day thing on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
You knew from 7 a.m. to 2, 3 o'clock you're at church because that was your community. And honestly, a great model of communal relationships when it comes down to the church is the Jehovah's Witness church. Now,
Wow.
JW has a lot of issues, but has a lot of issues overall. However, their idea and stance on community is not one that you can argue with because for them, pretty much life does not exist outside of their congregation, outside of fellow believers. And I think that if we adopted that nature in the Black church of saying, you know what, no, I'm going to trust this place to do what it has always done. The Black church has always been a place of nurturing. Back in the day, if you couldn't pay a bill, you went to the church. If you couldn't make a meal, you went to the church. If you had a baby that wouldn't stop crying and you needed help, you would go to the church mothers and ask, hey, how do I do this? When we bring back that idea of wisdom and we bring back that idea that the church is the answer and that this is my community, these are the people that help me, then I believe that it will flood outside of the church walls and become a part of who we are.
Now you kind of jabbed me a little bit. You talking about short services. Our service is about 60 minutes at this point, but one of the
However,
main
now I'm gonna give you a little grace because we talked about this before, and I know that part of that is out of necessity. But at the same time, I know your heart as a pastor that if you had the opportunity,
I'm coming to that, which is why one of the main benchmarks for our church this year is participation in fellowship opportunities.
yeah,
And I'm grateful for our event coordinator who for Black History Month, the church got together and we watched Lilies of the Field. Lilies of the Field with Sidney Poitier as a church family. We sat around bought a TV and put it in the fellowship hall so all of us can get together. And now we're doing Sunday breakfast so that we can, spend some more time in fellowship. Creating community, creating, because that was the thing.
Yeah.
Growing up, we spent so much time, and not just Sunday. We were at the church
every
day. And because we were there every day, we developed relationships with the people that we spent the most time with.
Yeah.
And so now, which I think is something that has to be reclaimed, maybe rethought, but definitely reclaimed.
And I'll add to that, if you think about it, in the 60s, the 70s, in that time period, it was pretty much one of those things of you got off work or you got out of school, you went to the church, because for so many, because we weren't allowed in other spaces, we allowed the church to become the center of life. So at 3:00 when kids got out of school, instead of going home before the invention of the latchkey kid, you went to the church and you had study hall. You had the retired teachers or the teachers who had just gotten off work who would come in and help with homework. You mentioned Sunday morning breakfast. We had breakfast at church. We would have Wednesday night fellowship dinner. I can remember, honestly, that's how I learned how to cook spaghetti, was Wednesday night fellowship dinner. My mother was one of those who was in rotation to cook. So being there with her, that was how I learned how to do things. Vacation Bible school, all of these different things, because the church understood, hey, our people aren't allowed elsewhere. So what we need, we're going to create here. That's how we had the advent of, at one point, everybody's church wanted a credit union. Because we said, okay, since they don't want to give us the money, let's be our own banks. That's how you had churches that started schools in the Black churches. Okay, you don't want our kids at your private school? Cool, we're going to create our own. So at this time period, especially with this current administration, we have to say, okay, how do we reclaim and take care of our own people? Because it is a necessity. We see every day that laws are changing that are making it hard to access food, making it hard to access healthcare, making it hard to access education. Like right now, we're waiting to see, and this is close to my heart as an educator. He did not say this in the introduction, but I teach in a private school. So we're waiting with bated breath to see if we're going to lose the Department of Education. We're waiting with bated breath to see what happens, because again, we've always made a space for our children, but now we have to double down on that says, you know what, if we want an expected end, we want a good future, we want certain things, we have to come together as a people, and first of all, know where we've come from, know what we've experienced, and say, okay, we're determined not to go there again, and work together. And I think that also that goes to fellowship of the churches. Again, so many of our churches, because we got away from denominational life, and I don't say that in a bad way, because I'm non-denominational, but because we got away from denominational life, we got away from the fellowship of the body. Because again, one thing that was for certain, growing up in the Baptist church, is churches were going to fellowship. Absolutely. And pastors were friends. Pastors weren't competing. Yes, we had a church on every corner, but there was also this idea of, we may believe differently, we're going to be different, but we're going to communicate, and we're going to be a community. We're going to work together. So again, I think that the hope for Black people, especially these days, lies in the Black church, reclaiming, and as you said, even renegotiating. What does it look like to do that in the 21st century? With this idea of the working parent, back then we had mothers who stayed at home, but now we very much have mothers who may be the primary breadwinners. So how do we renegotiate and redefine that in a way that works for us and also serves us well?
As you were talking, and I'm moving to the third question, because we've been on the first two questions almost. I remember having a conversation with Reverend Dr. Frederick Douglass Reese. And F.D. Reese was, the church was, the pastor was talking about not requiring his church to dress up.
Mm-hmm.
and dressed down. And Dr. Reese said, well, where else is my wife going to wear her furs?
I love it. I love it. I love it.
And he began to talk through, well, when we couldn't be anybody anywhere else,
Mm-hmm.
we were somebody at the church.
That's right.
And when we couldn't dress up and put on our good after 5 attire,
Mm-hmm.
we hold a banquet at the church
That's right.
so that we could dress up and wear our after 5. And we were in the ghetto. My wife couldn't wear no pearls around the house, but
That's
she could
right.
wear them to the church. And
Yeah.
he started explaining not necessarily a theological foundation for why the church did what it did, but anthropological or sociological framework for
Yeah.
why we did what we did.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing that people miss with the Black church. It's not so much just a theological, so it's not just so much a theological place, but it's also sociological, it's anthropological. The church for Black people literally was our everything.
Yeah.
That was where our social workers, our healthcare, because whereas a doctor, you come see them at their job because they were under whoever so and so thumb, they had to charge you XYZ. When you go see them at the church, they may say, hey, look, I know you ain't got no money, just cook me dinner.
That's right. That's right.
You know, even the church with the pastor nowadays, I know you ain't going to everybody's house for no chicken. But back in the day, we couldn't pay the pastor. So in order to pay the man of God, make sure the man of God was well taken care of.
Man, that Reverend Crum to this day, because he got the best piece of chicken that mother made.
Listen, so again, that was the point. Like, we were a people who said, look, I may not can do it this way, but I can do it that way. I can't get it here, but I can get it here. So I think we have to reclaim that and take back that mindset of saying, no, that's how we got here. Let's keep work. We don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
That's right.
Let's use what's been working.
And so, which opened the door perfectly for the next question. So, moving from honor mother and father, now we're talking about thou shalt not kill, and thou shalt not kill, which is actually the subject matter that we've been dealing with this very week here at the church. How can we expand that conversation? Because we're talking about social work and advocacy work. How can we expand this to talk about the vulnerabilities of Black women, domestic violence, state violence, abuse, etc., etc.? How can we take "Thou shalt not murder" and expand it to deal with that particular issue?
So first of all, we have to expand our definition of murder.
Okay.
As a people, we have to understand that murder is not just me physically killing you, but it's also a matter of disrespect. It's a matter of violence perpetrated against women. It's a matter of this idea of rape culture. It's this idea of don't ask, don't tell. So we have to expand our idea beyond just being murder, but also being violence against women. Which honestly, one thing I say in my dissertation, I can see it on the page. It says that Black women are one of the most visible and valuable resources to the Black church, but it's also the most ignored. We will create a program for everybody else in the church, for everything else in the church, but we ignore the women. Okay. And I say this with no disrespect to you, because you know I love you dearly. Mm-hmm. The male pastor should not be teaching the women's ministry. The male pastor should not be preaching the Women's Day. We have to take back this idea that women have to have their own theological agency. And by that, I mean that women have to be able to define their own God talk. The way that I see God is completely different from the way that Maurice is going to see God, because our experiences are different. And I say this as a Black woman who has overcome being raised by a single parent, a Black woman who has survived sexual assault, a Black woman who has been married and divorced and experienced these things. The way that I experience God is completely different than the way that Maurice is going to experience him. That's just like one of my favorite texts to teach is the woman with the issue of blood. His understanding of the woman with the issue of blood is completely different from that of someone who has a menstrual cycle, from someone who has had issues in that area. So the way that
which is why when I do preach a text like that, we have a conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so the way that I understand and see God in that way is completely different. One thing that I tell you, I'm an apologist for the Black church, but I'm also, because I'm an apologist, that means I can look at her and say, what's wrong? One thing that we have gotten wrong throughout the years is when Black women would come to the church with issues such as my husband is beating me, or my husband is doing this, that, and the third. We would often enforce this idea of silence, this idea of, well, what did you do? We have to move from that mindset, and we have to be protectors of all issues of murder or violence against Black women. We have to believe Black women. We have to accept that what they say has weight. We have to understand that we also have to provide protection for women against erasure and different types of harm, whether it's medical, whatever the case may be. We have to understand that, no, we need people who are trained in these areas to come in. We understand that one of the main populations who suffer from domestic violence is Black women. So I think part of it is also having a trauma-informed ministry. I tell people there is nothing wrong with Jesus and therapy. I faithfully pay my therapist on a consistent basis. Like, hey, sis, what we talking about today? Because again, we have to have this idea of, okay, we need more than just good church. Because again, like I said, for us, the safe place may be the church. Your husband may be knocking your head between the washer and the dryer, and you can't go to the social work office, but he doesn't bat an eye when you go to church. Cool. So I may not can go to the social work office, but the church can bring the social work office to me. You know, if I reveal that I'm dealing with this situation, having those setups, those necessary branches available to help. And I think that ultimately at this point in history, we have to move beyond just this idea that everybody's gonna figure it out. No, we have to provide the necessary resources to address the vulnerabilities that Black women have. So I tell people at this point, it's about trauma-informed ministries. Not only do you need a prayer warrior, but you need a social worker, you need a therapist, you need somebody who can get into the muck and mire of daily life with people. Because I say this, and you know, Maurice understands, he knows how I feel about this. Prayer, yes, prayer is the answer, but prayer ain't gonna fix everything. Prayer ain't gonna fix the fact that my husband want to hit me when I walk in the door. That's not gonna fix that. I need somebody who can say, okay, let me get you out of this situation. But for oftentimes, you know, I'm sure you guys have seen like the Purple Purse campaign and things like that, where women are often financially strapped, and then sometimes they have to stick around because they need stability for their children, or their children have been threatened. But I think the idea of the church has to be to expand beyond just meeting spiritual needs, but also continually meeting all types of natural needs, not just the ones that we immediately think of, like the groceries and the pantries and things like that, but also saying, okay, what sociological issues are you facing? What are your sociological determiners? Even if these people aren't available in the church, having those connections, those relationships that we can refer, or that we can, you know, say, hey, can I help you? Because there have been times, hey, if somebody reaches out to me in Columbus, Georgia, saying I need this, that, and the third, hey, Maurice, can your church do this? Or do you know somebody who does this? Can I send you this person? Because again, we have to move beyond this idea of it's just about just these spiritual natures. It has to move beyond that and realize, like, no, if we ain't nobody coming to save us, we gotta save us. And again, I believe that organizing starts in the Black church.
Interesting. This is the command. Like I said, the commandment for this week has been "Thou shalt not murder," and so we talked about it in Bible study on Tuesday at length, and I talked about the trauma cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Something hurts you, you internalize the wound, etc., etc. You internalize the wound, you develop coping mechanisms, and then if it is an unhealthy coping mechanism, you begin to inflict the same kind of pain on other people. I can say that from a preaching perspective, from a teaching perspective, but for the conversation that you're having, we need to be informed,
Mm-hmm.
but we also need to be ready to refer.
Absolutely.
Because that when we start talking about true trauma,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's abuse or neglect, significant emotional discomfort and disease, that's
Mm-hmm.
above your pastor's pay grade.
Absolutely.
And I am I am I am not so stuck on myself as to believe that I can properly talk to, diagnose, answer, give direction for some. No, you need a doctor. Your situation may require a prescription,
Amen.
and I'm not qualified to tell you go down to Walgreens and ask. So, so as we're talking about this, uh, the church has to be informed, but as Lesley is saying, we have to be well connected so that we can resource people. I think
Mm-hmm.
uh, that's really what I've been praying about as it relates to the future of the church,
Mm-hmm.
especially in this age, that the church becomes a resource center
Mm-hmm.
more than anything.
Yeah.
Spirituality is a resource. Emotional
Absolutely.
health is a resource. Family and community is a resource. And if we can locate all of that within the sacred community, within the church, as you've already said in this conversation, it spills over into the community. And then the community knows the church and
Mm-hmm.
knows I need this resource. I
I
can
can go
go
to the
to the church.
church. Yeah. And then you're also what people will miss, and this is just a shameless plug. That's also how you grow a church. People ask, how do I grow a church? Oftentimes, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So, in other words, people will say the knock on church is the church doesn't do X, Y, Z. But when a church becomes a true answer and starts meeting needs without creating these ideas of, oh, you have to be a member, or oh, you have to be this. That was one thing about the old church. They didn't care. If you came in with a need, we're going to meet that need
Mhm.
regardless of where you come from.
Yeah.
And that's how you win people.
So I want to shift to the next commandment, which gets into economics. This is going to be interesting. Uh, this is going to be interesting because now the historian in you gets to stand up. I know that's one of your favorite sides.
Yes.
So over the arc of Black women in America, how and even prior, how have Black women resisted economic exploitation? And I'm pulling on both sides of you with this question because not only we got the historian, now we got the strategist. And so, what kind of strategies have been used, can be used to combat something like a wage inequity, limited access to wealth building, um, to even legacy building? We can add that
Mhm.
into this as well. How is that fleshed out? How does that flesh out in your mind?
So one thing about the Black woman, we're real resourceful. You want to see you want to see something come to life. You put a Black woman up against the wall and tell her you got to get out this corner. Um, I honestly believe that that necessity is the mother of invention. When it comes down to a need, a Black woman, we're gonna make it happen. We're gonna take what we got and do what we got to do. I love the story um, with Elijah. in 2 Kings when he goes to the woman and asks her, what do you have in your house? And she says, this is what I have. He says, okay, go borrow a few vessels. And then, the oil proceeds to come. And that story always amazes me because I'm like, what does somebody think when you walk up to them with a jar that you borrowed from them, but tell them, I will give you back your jar if you give me $10.
What a look.
With this jar with this oil in it. And again, we know that it worked because it says,
God,
that she had what she needed. She was able to pay the debt.
I'll give you your jar back, but you got to pay for the oil that's in it. Oh God.
I'll give it back, but you got to pay me because I put something in it. I put something of value in it. So again, I always tell people it's certain stories in the Bible that I'm like, it can only be a Black woman because that's the only person who got enough guts to do some stuff like that. We're the only ones. We're the only ones who bold enough to tell you, oh yeah, I got your jar, but you got to pay me to get your jar that I borrowed. But hey, again, I think that's an example of how a Black woman became a pushback. She said, okay, I don't have what I need, but I know how to get it. And I think that she gives us a very powerful business principle in that she consulted the man of God. In other words, she said, look, I don't know what I'm doing, but let me consult something that's higher than I. She goes to the rock to use that terminology. But from there, it's like, okay, cool. What can I do? If you were even when we were on the plantations, they would, they would take us for their pleasure. They would take us for their sport. However, it was like, okay, I'm gonna fight back. You might do this, but I'm going to do that. So I always tell you, it's chess, not checkers when it comes down to a Black woman.
That's right. You
put us up against the wall, but I guarantee you, we gonna come out swinging. And I think that that's one way that we have always resisted. One thing that we have collectively refused to be bound. When you think of it, you had Harriet Tubman, who was a woman who led all these people to freedom. Now, I'm not saying a man couldn't have done it. However, it takes a certain level of boldness to say, listen here, either you move or I'm gonna shoot you. And still to this day, she never lost a passenger. It took a certain level of wisdom to say, okay, we got crying babies. How do we put these babies to sleep? And to be able to have, be able to feed babies and care for babies along the journey that it would take to go from the south to the north. I think that we're in a season. Now, I will say this. I am of the mindset that for the next 3-4 years, don't ask me to do nothing. You done got all the labor you're going to get, all the free labor you're going to get. If it does not enhance my life or make my life better, don't ask me. And I honestly, again, rest is a way that Black women have resisted, because as a whole, we're pretty much on the mindset of, you know what? Y'all wanted to make that decision. Go blow yourself up. I ain't got nothing to do with that.
We tried to tell you.
We tried to told you. We tried. Because if you look at elections for the last 2 election cycles, it have been Black women that have pushed the vote, who have gotten out and gotten people who weren't even registered to vote, who weren't even thinking about voting. It was Black women who encouraged that. And now we're in a season where Black women are like, oh, okay, cool. So I'm just gonna make my bag and you figure it out best you can. And then one thing about a Black woman, we're gonna have a job and a hustle. We gonna have a degree with the job. We gonna go to school, learn how to be a nurse, but also we gonna do some braids in the kitchen on the weekend because I need a little extra pocket money that I don't want to have to justify to nobody. I'm gonna sell you a plate of chicken that I paid $5 for, but you're gonna pay $25. We're going to come up with something. We're going to be multi-talented. That's why I love girls today, because they have all these hustles, and you like, baby, what? I remember being in school. I don't know if this may be a little after you. One thing we did to make money in school is we would fold a string into the keychains.
Absolutely.
Everybody had to come up. Maybe you couldn't make a whole keychain, but you had mastered how to start it. Cool. I'm gonna charge you $2 to start your keychain off. You may not pay me for the whole thing, but you're gonna pay me for my labor. So again, it was always this idea of, okay, I'm going to make everything count, even when it came down to physical harm. Yes, you might harm me, you might hurt me, but I'm gonna make it count. I'm going to use that pain for something. And I tell people, I hate this idea of black girl magic. Maurice hurt. Oh, the first time he ever heard me say that, it grinded his gears. Like, it grinded his gears. But once I explained it to him, I was like, I'm tired of being resilient. Yeah. We shouldn't have to be this resilient. Like, when you think about the millennial black woman, we have lived through Y2K, 9/11. We done lived through 2 Bush administrations. We have lived through, we on our second Trump term. We tired of being resilient. We tired that we want to rest. We want the soft girl life. But at the end of the day, there's one thing, regardless of how tired we are, you're not going to keep us down. And we're not going to be denied. You may say no, but we're going to keep fighting. We're going to keep coming back. And I think that has been the system of resistance that black women have used. We persist. Even when it comes down to wage inequality, yeah, we can't necessarily make you pay more, but we will quiet quit a job in a heartbeat. You're gonna feel our presence. If we decide we don't want to be there, no, you're gonna realize, like, dang, I should have held on to her. We gonna make you realize, like, oh, okay, we are the masters of teaching a lesson and helping people to understand, okay, I need them a little bit more than I thought I did. So I think that those are the ways that we continue to do that. We continue to show up as we have always done. But at the same time, I think we move to this idea of keeping our wealth in-house.
Oh.
If you own a black business, do so with excellence. When we circulate those dollars back in the day, you couldn't touch Black Wall Street. Of course, everybody knows about the one in Oklahoma, but there were Black Wall Streets all across the country. When we were in our bag, when we were organized as a community and working together and saying these are the things that we're going to do, we did them, and we did them in a way that it scared people. One of my favorite, again, point of disagreement. One of my favorite scenes in Malcolm X is when he goes to the police station. Nobody knows where he's going, and you have all these people start coming behind him. And then when the white man looks and says, that's too much power for one black man to have. But at the end of the day, when we come together as a community, that's the kind of power that we have. Because when you think about it, when you look at Martin Luther King, he was not executed for civil rights. He was executed when he decided he was going to organize black people to get better money for the trash man. Now, all this stuff he had done for civil rights, all this time he had worked for this and desegregate this, desegregate that, get rid of this, get rid of that, it wasn't a problem. But the minute he started talking about money, we got to get him up out of here.
Vietnam and money.
That is the power that we as a people have, that when we can get on one accord, and then even sisters working together. Again, those were ways that we resisted because we found the subversive ways to get things done.
Now, I'm moving on to the next question. I am afraid of this next question.
I think I know which question this is, but we're gonna be all right. We're gonna make it.
I am afraid. Mama, come get me. Because I know who this is. How has truth-telling functioned as spiritual practice and survival strategy for Black women? And we're going to open up for contemporary example of this in action.
Oh God!
I'm not responsible for the next 5 to 10 minutes of this conversation. I am.
Ooh, see, it be your own people, man. It be your own people. So here's the thing. Picture it, Africa. We as a people are an oral tradition. We ain't wrote nothing down. To this day, it still ain't wrote down. We are an oral people. We pass our lessons, we pass our information, we pass our heritage orally. So one thing as a people, especially Black women, we don't care about telling you the truth. Whether it hurts your feelings, it bless your soul, whatever the case may be, we gonna tell you like it is. Literally, before we started this conversation, I said, I'm not gonna say what I'm thinking. And he was like, no, go ahead. I already know. Just go and rip the band-aid off. But it's the fact that we see as Black women, there's a certain prophetic nature to each Black woman. The Bible says that we're all giving gifts here, there, otherwise, whatever the case may be. But as Black women, we move through life with a certain intuition, a certain foresight.
Mm-hmm.
We have a certain hindsight.
Mm-hmm.
We have very good physical sight. And oftentimes those things come together in the perfect storm, and we're able to tell you ahead of time, don't you go do that, because you go do that. And prime example, we talked about this election. We told y'all, don't y'all go do that. Y'all gonna run off a cliff. Don't you do that. That don't make sense. Don't you do that. Oh, okay. Y'all wanted to do that. All right. That's why all the Black women like, okay, well, I'm checking out for the next few years. We have some of us who are realigning our citizenship, who's saying, you know what, let me just get up out of Dodge. How about that? But I think that has been key to our source of survival, is the fact that we don't mind speaking our minds. We don't mind telling you now. You may not like what we got to say. You may not agree with what we got to say. You may not like the way we're going to say it. But at the end of the day, it's true. Like, I was messing with my reason. I told him, I said, I got a little small mouth, but I'm going to listen to you when you talk. I mean, that's just Black women. We got a little small mouth. That's who we are. We are outspoken. And I think that over time, that has worked to our benefit, because we refuse to be silent. Because at the end of the day, the problem number one with us, we know we be right. That's problem number one. We know we be right, so we got to say what we feel. But on the other hand, it's also one of those things of, we feel like, oh, y'all not gonna say it, so I'm gonna say it. Somebody got to say it. And since it's got to be said, I'm just gonna say it. And I think that we see that both in natural and spiritual realms. We feel like it's got to be said. We're going to tell you the truth, what we know to be true about God. Now, whether you agree or disagree, that's on you. But we're gonna put it out there. And I think it's the same way in the natural. We're gonna tell you how we feel, how we think about a situation, but it's up to you how you take it. And I think contemporarily, again, the prime example is the last election. You had every Black woman with a voice saying, don't do that. You had Stacey Abrams out here, sis, worked her tail off, trying to get people to understand, like, hey, no, this is what we need to do. Even if you don't vote for Kamala, you need to consider this plan. When you think about Project 2025, it was Black women who blew that open. It was Black women who started saying, no, you need to take this page by page so you can understand what he's saying. Again, we're going to tell you, but it's up to you to decide. So I think that we're watching that play out. But again, it's just this idea that we are an oral people. So anything that we do, our power is going to be found in our words. Which again, it biblically aligns when the Bible says that the power of life and death lie in the tongue, and you're going to eat the fruit thereof. So how you choose to function and how you choose to move through this world is through truth telling, and we believe that we will see the results of our truths, whatever those are. And I feel like it checks out historically, experientially, all the things we see that's what happens when we tell you the truth. The truth is the truth.
When I think, and I'm not going to belabor it because our time is far spent, but when I think of a contemporary truth teller, I think bleach blonde.
Bad body.
Bad.
I love her. I love her dearly.
Beach blonde. Bad built. Bush body. Like, what? Why you had to come for that girl like that? You didn't have to come.
She started it when she said that her eyelashes was in her way. Like, ma'am, me and these lashes can read very well. So since you want to do it, let me. But again, this is also an example of how like, of course, everybody knows what Representative Crockett said, but nobody knows what Marjorie said to her first.
Absolutely.
Nobody knows that this lady literally sat there and called this girl illiterate and told her that she don't understand how she got her position and came for her with her lashes and her weave. Nobody knows that, but everybody in the world can quote that line.
Everybody. And just watching the trajectory of her work in Congress has been an exercise in using the energy of a millennial Black woman to project onto the world stage a truth that some don't want to accept, embrace, would rather ignore. And in typical Southern Black woman style, no, you couldn't hear this. You can't ignore this.
Exactly.
And while that is in the secular arena, even though still modern, still contemporary, she's not a young woman. But I think of a Juanita Weems.
Yes.
In the religious space.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say even if you want to go into the religious space, I think there's even space to look at our beloved ancestor, Katie Geneva Cannon. She was told that she couldn't do it. She was told that she did not have the capacity or the space to do it. However, she said, tell your truth. She said, stand your truth or speak your truth, even if your voice shakes.
Yeah.
You know, at the end of the day, like, as Black women, we have to stand in our truth, even when it's uncomfortable, even if you're the only one standing.
Yeah.
You still got to stand.
Yeah.
You know, that's the only way to do it.
Yeah. All right, I'm coming at 6. I got 2 more. You got time for 2 more?
Absolutely.
Okay. So let's do, we're coming up on the 10th commandment, and then we're going to do a wrap up. So we're using the womanist lens today. How do we come at thou shalt not covet with a mind of redefining it for abundance, not just material wealth, but, you know, how do we shape that? The term I like to use is for whole life prosperity.
Yes.
Yeah. From your perch, how do we set that up?
So, you know, that's actually one of the terms that you use that I love, whole life prosperity, which actually goes into my answer. I think we have to reframe and redefine and renegotiate what wealth is. Wealth moves beyond this capitalistic idea of wealth, which is this idea of individualism and I got to get mine. I'm all about me. I'm going to get my bag. And we move into this place of saying that no, abundance is about communal thriving. It's about well-being. It's about spiritual fulfillment. It's about saying like, no, my wealth is contingent on my brother having what he needs. What good is it to me to have $1 million with myself being a single woman? Pretty much my only responsibility is making sure my mother is well. But I see Maurice struggling with 2 kids, trying to, you know, spread the word of God. And I'm not saying, okay, how can I come alongside and assist? How can I be of benefit? How can I sow into what you're doing? Again, it goes back to this idea of communal living. I think that is one thing that we as a people, we have always had this idea. However, when we came to these shores, the oppressors, the enslavers knew that was our strength. So that was the first thing that they took from us, the idea of identity and community, because they knew that if we had those two things, that we could make it shape, we could make it move. And I think we also have to look at wealth and abundance coming from areas in joy and love, and having those reciprocal relationships, that those are also valuable forms of wealth. That wealth is not just a financial state, but it's also a life state. One thing that you were sharing behind the house is you were sharing how you were working out, and you were sharing how you had lost weight. And I'm saying, like, God, it makes me think back to when we were younger and you were experiencing some of the health issues, and you were going through these different things, and it was like, I just want to have a long life. I want to overcome these things. And now seeing you on the other side as a survivor and saying, like, oh no, I'm working out, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, da 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 da. I'm working out every day, when it was a time that you might say, oh, I worked out once this week. Or you ordering this and ordering that, and you say, oh no, this is what I want to eat. Or certain things that you were cooking all the time or eating all the time, is like, no, I can't do that now. But again, it's this idea of saying, like, no, I'm going to invest in the wealth of my health. I'm going to invest in that area, because I want to, with long life, you will satisfy me. So it's not, we take those biblical promises and we want to just throw them like spaghetti at the wall and get them to stick. But no, it's like, okay, he promised us long life, but what are you doing to help? Are you doing your part to make sure that you're not putting too much stress on your heart? Are you trying to get your asthma under control? Especially us as a people, we love some comfort food. Now I'm gonna tell them, I love a good piece of apple pie and some ice cream. But am I eating that every day? Or is that just something occasional? Am I, eating the things that I know I need to eat? Am I eating my vegetables? Am I getting my water? All those things. And also, this one is hard. I'm holding in your mind. I need you to say that she holding my hands with a motherly and a sisterly touch. And she's saying this in love. She is not cussing at me. She's saying this because she loves me and she wants to see me prosper. We as a people have to learn to rest. We have to understand that our bodies are made to regenerate when we rest. And ultimately, it's healing in our rest. And that is a form of resistance. When we say, okay, I'm getting out of the grind culture. I just finished reading a book called Sensual Faith by LaVon Briggs. And she said that one day she called her grandmother, and her grandmother asked her how she was doing. And she told her grandmother that she was just in the grind. And her grandmother said, what is this grind you speak of? Machines grind. You're not a machine. And when I tell y'all, that blessed me. One of my friends, her son works at Mercedes. At the Mercedes plant, they get 2 weeks off a year because they shut down the plant completely, because they said the machines need to rest. If a machine needs to rest.
Listen, at the gym that I go to now, there are certain like even on yesterday, I went to go get on my typical Stairmaster, and there was a sign: everyone needs a rest day, use something else.
Listen, if a machine needs to rest, how much more? How much more do we in frail bodies? One thing I encourage people, there's a ministry online called the Nap Ministry. And they talk about Black people resting is healing and resistance. It's a great ministry, great follow if you're looking for something to encourage you in that area. But again, it's understanding that our wealth is not just material, but it's the piece of life. Like one thing that even Maurice and I were talking about is he's always desired to be a great father. And we were just talking about some of the moves that he's made, and how even in that he's setting his children up for life without him. That's a form of wealth. That's a form of abundance. Like, yes, there is a financial component to it, but there's another level when a child can say, my daddy took care of me in life and in death. Yeah. Like he wasn't just concerned about my right now needs, but he was also concerned about my futuristic self. And I think that that's where we have to go as a people. We have to realize that all wealth isn't material. Yeah. That there are certain things like I was talking about the pictures that you have of preaching with the kids when they were younger. They may not understand in that moment what's going on, but there's a lot of power when it looks back that says, okay, daddy held me through a sermon. So it gave them this idea of saying, no, you matter.
Yeah.
Regardless of what my daddy's doing, I'm still priority for him. I matter. That's a form of wealth. To know that no matter what my daddy's doing, he's going to stop for me. And he's going to embrace me wherever we are, whatever's going on. So I think it's just reframing what we understand to be wealth.
That is the word. That is the word. It is a complete reframe that, and I think this isn't limited to just the womanist approach, but it should be the biblical approach across the board, that Christians, this may be a hard saying, but it is the truth. Christians should not embrace a capitalistic definition of success and or wealth.
Absolutely not.
It's just not the case. The capitalistic definition of success and wealth says, and now I'm getting in trouble, but here we are. But I'm not going to take the jobs of 1,000 people just so that I can increase the bottom line of maybe 11 people.
Yeah.
You know, I shared to maybe not this week, maybe last weekend, I shared to my Facebook page a video of a senator going through the first 6 weeks of this administration and pointing out this was done so that money can be given to this person, and this was done so that these people could benefit by giving money to this person, and this was done because this person had cases pending, and down and down. That is not a Christian or biblical standard or framework of success or wealth.
Absolutely. And I think
if I have to harm you to bless me, it is not a blessing.
Absolutely. At that point, it's lost its efficacy. I think one place where we see this on display, the Madam C.J. Walker self-made series on Netflix. I want to say it's about episode 4 or 5, where she has the opportunity to make the deal with the drugstore. However, her workers point out, if you make this deal with them, you fire all of us. And she's trying to make the case, and she goes back and forth. And it's that famous scene where she has the conversation with John Rockefeller, and he tells her, at the end of the day, you're the boss. You have to decide what's best for them, and you tell them what to do. And ultimately, he gives her the advice to take the deal. However, she comes back home and she looks at them and says no. She said, regardless of what I'm losing in this deal, you're more important to me. And when you deal with a lot of sacred text outside of the Bible, when you deal in bell hooks, and a recent book I read by Dr. Christina Cleveland, we look at this idea of how we have somehow, as a nation, as a society, made capitalism God. And we have somehow equated this idea of capitalism with Christianity, when honestly, it couldn't be further from the truth. It couldn't be further from each other on the spectrum. And I think that ultimately we have to get past this idea of thinking that capitalism is the way.
One of my preaching mentors, it is amazing that he's not done doctoral work. He has the scholarship of an earned doctorate. But Maurice, I just didn't need it. Okay.
I love it.
That guy says that America has 3 idols: racism, sexism, and capitalism.
Absolutely.
And he says if you want to trace all of the evils of this nation down to its roots, at the root of every issue in America will be racism, sexism, and capitalism.
Absolutely. I mean, just briefly, that's even the beginning, the start of the transatlantic slave trade.
Yeah.
And the amazing thing about America is we forget why the people came here in the first place. There were two reasons that people came to America. They either came to America to escape religious persecution, religious injustice, or they came here to colonize to provide more land for their leadership, whether that was the king, the queen, or whoever. Um, and so often we want to just focus in on the religious aspect and we kind of erase the capitalistic form, which again is a tool of capitalism, because capitalism is deceptive. So it's this idea of, okay, we just gonna make everybody think it was religious differences. Like, no, ultimately that was the goal, is that we wanted to claim more land.
We were going to claim the land.
Absolutely.
And take the gold.
Absolutely.
And you want to, and the reason I can remember that phrase is because that's what the guy said on the movie Pocahontas.
That's what he said. That's what he said. He said, we want to take the land and take the gold. And ultimately, that's what Christopher Columbus was looking for. He's saying gold, and the Native Americans are talking about corn.
That's right.
But again, I think that, and that even echoes if you kind of deal with Jesus and the Disinherited. I'm listening to that book again.
Dr. Thurman.
Absolutely. It's right there in the first chapter when he talks about the three evils that deal with the disinherited, and it's the same concept. Same concept.
Yeah. Last question. If I can get it to turn to the last question. What would you say to those who see these interpretations as departures from traditional readings rather than expansions?
Wow. Okay. So no, this is a question that I have dealt widely with. If you remember, we had this conversation when I talked about studying ATRs.
Yeah.
Because we were kind of just sharing that experience. I think that first of all, you need to open your mind. That's number one. Secondly, I believe that biblically this falls into the category of he who has an ear, let him hear. And in that hearing, it's not just the word that's used, is not just the hearing as in your audible hearing, but it's also a hearing to understand, a hearing to perceive, a hearing to gain knowledge. So often, one thing that we as a church, again, this is a Black church, I'm not going to say failure, it's a misstep, that we often idolize the Bible. We put the Bible on the level of God, as in acting as if the Bible is God. What we fail to realize is that, yes, we do believe that the Bible is the inspired word of God, that God inspired men to write the Bible, but I think we also have to be mindful that it was written to a certain culture in a certain time period. And if we're not going to do the work of actually researching the time period, getting an understanding of what was happening, we misapply certain scriptures to today. For example, when we look at Paul, and of course, all of his teaching on slavery, while slavery is never an answer, you have to also take into consideration that Paul was a Roman citizen. So there was a certain beholdenness to Roman systems of thinking and Roman systems of understanding that he also would have been beholden to. I tell people oftentimes that as Christians, we kind of equate Paul to God, and we miss that Paul himself will say that it was Paul who said, not God. Because again, that was a certain time period, and there were certain things going on that he was also inherently speaking to. And I think that we have to remember that all things are God given for a reason. I believe that even, the Bible says that all leadership comes from God. Yes, I may not agree with current leadership. However, I believe that there's a lesson in this, that there's something that we as a people need to move forward. The same thing with teaching. I believe that there's a lesson in everything if you're willing to find it. In the book of Proverbs, it says that it is to the glory of God to conceal a thing, and it's the honor of a king to search it out.
Absolutely.
I believe that we have to search out truth, and we have to search out understanding. And I believe that anything has the ability to become sacred. That's one thing that I love about ATRs and African culture as a whole. There was no dichotomy between sacred and secular. They moved together, and I think that the same way that they had that interconnectedness, we have to see that, as you stated, that we're not just theologians, but we're also scholars. You know, we have gone to school, we have done the work of reading the books, comparing the perspectives, and I think that it's this idea that every Christian should be a theologian. Every Christian
Absolutely.
should be able to have their own specific God talk. That's the whole idea behind the work that I do with spiritual formation with Brown Girl Theology. Is every woman should be able to tell you why she believes what she believes, in a way that's unique to her. And I think that over time we develop those beliefs by what we study, what we consume, what we understand. So I think that if you would take the time to be an informed believer, studies that show thyself approved, in other words, step beyond what you've always been told and realize, like, okay, there's another world beyond just the one that I see. How do I engage that world? You'll often find, like I told you in the beginning, that there's so much more alike than there is different. So I always tell people, like, hey, just because womanist theology isn't for you, you can't deny the efficacy of it, because our God, like our Savior, was he's not the blonde hair, blue eyed picture that we see on the wall, but he was a brown man who came in as a revolutionary. He came in as a issue of resistance against the state. So I think that we have to just engage with this idea that everything is not about coming in and blending in with the status quo. The Bible literally calls Christians disruptors. It talks about those who have turned the world upside down. How do we turn the world upside down if we don't know what the world is doing? So again, even though you may not agree with every viewpoint, you have to at least know what's happening. And once you know what's happening, then you can connect the dots to what you believe, and you realize, like, okay, so it does work together. You just have to take the time to find the common thread and the common theme.
I not saying that everyone should go to seminary.
All right.
But my first day in seminary, professor walks into the room. He has this big black Bible sitting on the desk when we walked in the room.
Uh-huh.
And he waited until everybody was in the room. He walks in the room, picks up the Bible, and throws it into the trash can.
Yeah.
And he tells us, by the end of this semester, I'm going to take your Jesus from you.
Yeah.
And it was to grab our attention. He was the senior pastor of a missionary Baptist church. Okay. He was the moderator of the Baptist District Association.
Yeah.
But in that context, while handling theological things, he was challenging us to think beyond our echo chamber.
Absolutely.
And I think that's why, which is why in February I wanted to bring on Tyree, and why this month I wanted to bring you on. Because yes, I'm building theologians at this church.
Absolutely.
Every time they hear me preach and teach, they're hearing a systematarian deal with the Bible. And because they hear it regularly, whether they know it or not, they're becoming systematarians, because that's what they're listening to and eating from and gleaning from.
Yeah.
But rather than just bring only systematarians, let's bring in somebody who talks liberation. Let's bring in somebody who talks womanist, so that, because you never grow until you're stretched.
Absolutely.
And so, and I'll be completely honest, when I hear that phrase, make the Bible God, it almost makes me cringe. It's just me.
I knew it would.
But not just with you. I've had this conversation in the classroom, And then we get into, okay, are we talking about the Word of God, or are we talking about the text of the book, or what, you know? But if I just hear that phrase and turn it off, I'm not able to grow. I'm not able to learn.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that's the beauty of these conversations. I remember when you first started talking about doing Formation Saturdays. I think that is, again, the beauty of the Black church, because now we're able to educate. I think like that's the thing that we miss, the power of Sunday school. We got rid of, some churches have gotten rid of Sunday school and Vacation Bible School, but that was a place where we went through theological formation, where we could talk and have those conversations. So I think that it's important that spaces like this are coming back, that we're creating our hush harbors, our places where we go and talk. Because again, everybody doesn't need to go to seminary. I tell people that all the time. Everybody does not need to go to seminary. There is a certain person, there's a certain type that can endure that. But at the same time, we all must be able to give an answer for our faith, as the Bible says. Be able to give an answer for what we believe and why.
Yeah. Which is why when you started on your dissertation work and we were having those early conversations, we're done with the lesson. We just wrapping up here. My comment to you was, remember me when you're writing.
Yeah.
I am a local church pastor who does not see, has never been trained to see, has never been exposed to the interconnectedness of traditional Christianity with African traditional religion. So while you're writing this, think about me. Help me to see it. Help me to understand it. Because, I'm crazy. I will say it's wrong until you prove me right.
That's why I love my friend, because you're wrong till you prove him right.
Yeah, you're wrong until when you can show it to me. Okay, I was wrong. It was there. I didn't see it. But until then, that ain't God. No, But I have to be open enough to have a conversation and to listen, and have friends like Lesley who will argue with me and still be my friend after the argument.
Of course. Look, I was gonna say, I think the most we've ever done is like, you know what? You're just thick-headed and hang up the phone and then call me 5 minutes later.
I think one time I said you weren't saved.
Yeah, you probably did. I'm not going to question that. You probably did.
You just ain't saved. I gotta get you saved. And
that was the running joke for a while.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I thank you so much. You have been extremely generous with your time, and
of course.
I know you got a lot going on. How's the dissertation coming? How's that work?
Listen, man of God, keep your friend in prayer. We are literally on the final stretch. By the grace of God, we are planning to defend the final week in March, which I will invite you. What? Right? It's gone so quick. So as we speak, yes, I am literally writing the last 2 chapters.
When preparing for this, I pulled up your proposal.
Yep.
That is crazy to me.
Yep. Last 2 chapters, we have done the implementation. I have done all the things, and we are writing the last 2 chapters. So with any grace, the plan is to defend the last week in March. So hopefully by April 1st, we will officially be done and just waiting on graduation.
Wonderful. Are you going to publish it?
Yeah. So, that was the thing. My advisor was like, so what's your next step? I was like, bro, I just want to breathe after this is over. He's like, well, you only have a small window to publish. I'm like, so the plan is to publish. That is the plan at this point.
Yeah, I can't wait to get my hands on it and read it and enjoy the fruits of your labor. What's going on with Brown Girl Theology?
So of course we are on all the social media platforms. We're all the things. She has been radio silent at this point until we finish the dissertation, because there are certain things that I don't want to say publicly until the work is done, just to kind of back up some of the ideas. But there is an archive of different things that we've discussed. So my goal is, again, if we stick to the timeline, y'all should start seeing more activity on the platform around April. And I'm hopefully going to plan my next round of formation classes at the end of the summer. Yeah, so I'm hoping to do another round at the end of the summer.
Wonderful. I am absolutely, completely proud of you.
Thank you.
I am in your corner 100%, 10 toes down, and we'll fight some more at another time.
Absolutely.
Listen, thank y'all for being a part of Formation this month. We'll be back with another conversation in the month of April. I love you. Peace.